I know, and I'm guessing that you've had the same experience, that you take a risk on somebody and it turns out not to have been the right thing to do, but then when they commit the second crime, you can deal with them at that point and be secure in the knowledge with yourself that you tried, you gave them every opportunity, they've apparently chosen not to accept it, and as a result of it, they need to be dealt with it in a different way.
That's correct. I mean, I almost look at criminal justice as to a certain degree, like a pyramid, and you try to provide people with opportunities the first time they commit an offense. You put them on probation, you do things, you agree to put them on interim probation, where if they're successful, they may not even get a criminal conviction of it. But once shame on you, twice shame on me.
That's
and
right.
if they come back, then you have to say, listen, I don't have any tolerance for it anymore, because if you don't learn your lesson, then the punishment becomes a little tougher. Of course, you say that, but then again, you're always subject to the quality of the case that you have in front of you. But so it doesn't always happen necessarily, but there are certainly people out there that you see quite often and haven't learned their lesson. My father, as you're aware, was a prosecutor in this county for 34 years,
right.
and we often discuss the fact that we have jointly prosecuted generations of people, and it can be like, often I'm an attorney because of my father, and my grandfather was an attorney. I certainly think that they played an influence. It's learned behavior, and there are families out there that happen to learn the behavior.
You raised that about generations. Kind of as a humorous aside, I've got my own personal bets on two families in Chautauqua County. I'm sure you've all seen in newspapers 5 generations of Smiths, 5 generations of Jones, those types of things. Well, there's a couple families that are in the contention for 5 generations of felons, and I'm waiting to see which of the two it is going to be first. Yeah, and it's unfortunate that it happens that way. Well, we talked about, for example, youthful indiscretion, which might lead to criminal activity. Where we are going to go with the balance of this program, however, I hope, is to say that one of the other causes of criminal activity may be an unabiding addiction to some form of drug. And when I say drug, I'm not just talking about cocaine or marijuana. It could be alcohol, it could be painkillers. There are any number of different drugs that might impair somebody's judgment to a point where they commit criminal activity. Sometimes because, for example, a lot of the drug cases that I prosecuted when I was DA dealt with people who really weren't drug dealers. They're not getting stuff from Mexico and selling it en masse. They're selling small amounts of controlled substances to make a profit so they can buy more controlled substances to keep their habit going. What they do is just as illegal as the big drug dealer. What they do is just as harmful to them and society as the big drug dealer, but there's a differing reason that that crime occurs. As a consequence of that, I think this county first started a drug court program in Jamestown City Court. It's got to be at least 10 or 15 years ago. I can tell you that how it started. I wanted a drug court program after I'd seen the success in, for example, Erie County, and I asked the public defender at that time if he would be interested in joining me in an effort to get a drug court. He said no at the time because he felt it was just a tool of the prosecutor's office to get a conviction.
To delay sentence.
That's correct. Then he was succeeded by Kevin Laumer, and then Kevin and I went to see the late Justice Doyle up in Buffalo. We told them we both supported the drug court concept, and I can remember we then, with Justice Doyle, went to Judge Lamancuso in Jamestown, had him take us to lunch, pay for it, and then got him to do the extra work. That's the seed of the first drug court program. Could you please tell us, though, the philosophy behind drug courts, what drug courts do, how many people are in them, what type of crimes they get in for them, and the philosophy insofar as the carrot and stick are concerned?
Yes, and being one of your prosecutors at the time, of course, I looked at it as being an advantage because at the time I thought, well, it's just a delayed sentence. We could take care of the case, and at some point this person would fail and they would come back. Soon after we implemented them, and we have expanded the drug treatment courts to the city of Dunkirk, and so we have 2 hubs operating out. Doesn't mean that the crime needs to be committed in Dunkirk or Jamestown. You can pull in cases from anywhere in the county.
Right.
What I look for, and ultimately the say, in a general respect, the say as to whether or not someone gets into the drug court is left to me. I am still active in that. I don't let an ADA do it.
Certainly without your review.
I take the file myself, I review it. What we look for from the beginning is I say to the defense attorney, if they're interested in that, you need to go and get your client evaluated. They go and meet with the drug treatment court coordinator, Kathy Newton in Jamestown, Leanne Lazzaroni up in the city of Dunkirk. She goes through an evaluation and determines whether or not they're a proper candidate for drug treatment court. In other words, I think she determines whether or not indeed they have an addiction. Once they do that, everything's forwarded to me. I take a look at the file. I will then, if I deem that the person is appropriate based upon their criminal history, the crime that they committed is an appropriate candidate for drug treatment court, I then write up an offer sheet. Typically that offer sheet will, typically will be a plea to the charge, depending upon it. Sometimes I might reduce it one stage, but I will have them plead. For example, if it's a felony charge, I'll say they need to plead to the felony. And then I give the scenarios in both cases, if they're unsuccessful or if they're successful in the drug treatment court. If they're successful, it's the carrot, and generally it will be a reduction of the charge down to probably a misdemeanor level with some sort of promises to sentence, like probation or something like that. And then, of course, there's also a stick, which is an indication of what's going to happen to this individual if they're unsuccessful. And that typically is at least some sort of jail time, if not some sort of state prison term.
And the stick is always such that if they fail the drug court program, that the stick would be more than had they just walked in and pled guilty to the charge without the drug court program at all.
That's correct. And I get into some discussions, not with you, but some defense attorneys regarding that. And defense attorneys will sometimes say to me, listen, I could walk them in and plead them and I'll get less than what you're promising if they're unsuccessful. And my response to that always is this. It takes more than just my stick being held over their head. I need to know that this individual understands the import of having the opportunity of taking this program and that they really want it. Most people that go into these programs, the toughest time period is the first 1/3 of the program. Right. They're most subject to relapse, they're most subject to failing, and you really need to believe when you're assessing candidates that it's someone who at least somewhere in the back of their head has said, I want to help myself, and it really comes down to that. And if someone's willing to say, well, if I plead guilty now, I know I'll get 1 year, but if I'm unsuccessful in the program and I'm going to get a
2 years,
right, or a state prison term, if they say, well, I'll take that risk, then at least somewhere in the back of their head they're saying, I want to get better.
And it shows some level of commitment.
It shows some level of commitment on their part. And really it comes down to, we can give these individuals all the assistance we can, but in the end, it really comes down to their willingness to help themselves.
And of course, the drug court programs have a degree of, for lack of a better term, forgiveness in them. You mentioned relapse. If somebody turns up 3 months into the program and has a dirty urine test, that isn't an automatic disqualification and off to prison they go. The purpose of the drug court program is to treat them, to see what the reason was there was a relapse, to try to prevent it in the future.
That's right, and the drug courts will occasionally impose certain sanctions for relapses. If someone comes in and tests positive for a drug, they may go spend the weekend in the county jail. Right. They may be forced to go into an in-house treatment program, for example. The system is designed to have some flexibility. We're not looking to necessarily, on the first time someone does something incorrectly, to bounce them out of the program. It's a very, and like I said before, when it came out, I thought of it as just being a delayed sentence, but when you look at the numbers and you look at the success rates of these programs, they're very, very successful in comparison to just imposing a sentence of jail and sending them off. I mean, people will say that all state prison or jail does to you is make you a better criminal. And I don't know if that's the case, but certainly you're not doing our society any good by necessarily putting someone that's an addict in jail. If, again, the whole idea behind it is if we can help these people help themselves, you are going to get someone that on the back end of this is going to hopefully be someone who gets a job, pays for their own living, and it's not a drain on our society, and that's well worth it. Moreover, although there is a cost involved in running drug treatment courts, it doesn't compare to the amount that it costs to house a prisoner. So in the end, if you're able to get someone back on the straight and narrow, it's certainly worth it.
Now, just so people out there aren't thinking that this is a wholesale program to reduce your caseload, there are certain people charged with certain crimes who just aren't eligible for drug court, no matter how addicted they may be. Isn't that right?
Absolutely. And again, you sort of go back and you draw the line at violent crimes, for example. We don't let anyone in. If you're charged with an assault second, you're charged with obviously things like homicides, robberies, rapes, these sorts of things. They don't qualify. Do we let someone who may have committed, if it's a young kid and he's really addicted and he's been charged with a burglary second, will we plead him to a burglary third in order to get him into the program? Absolutely. I mean, we have that discretion. We work that in. But for the most part, we're not allowing anyone who asks to go into the program to go into the program. New York State, however, of course, about a year and a half ago, again changed the drug sentencing laws. And now, whereas typically we weren't allowing people that were known as active sellers into the program because it was sort of like giving the keys to the candy shop to the kids. But they have allowed now, and it's sort of taken out of local prosecutors' hands, the abilities for repeat drug sales. Individuals are going off to state prison to do what's called a diversion program, and that will get them into the drug treatment program without my ability to say yes or no. I don't know how that works. We've had, I think, probably 6 or 7 in the time period go into the program. The nice thing about it is, I will say, is they need to plead to what they were charged with, which is a Class B felony.
And it's a fairly lengthy prison term, it could be anyway.
It's a lengthy prison sentence if they don't.
Right.
Right.
Now, just to clarify a matter, when you mentioned burglary second, it's when you enter a dwelling, that in New York State is considered a violent felony, but very few burglary seconds are actually violent crimes. So that would explain what you meant by reducing it to burglary third, to let a kid who might have made again, the youthful indiscretion, who also has drug problems, to participate in the program and allow him to be treated as he should be.
That's right. I mean, most burglaries, although it's defined as a violent crime, the vast majority of the burglaries occur when no one's there.
Right.
They occur in places like summer cottages when no one's been there for a month or 2 months, and they're, if it's an 18-year-old kid doing it, you need to take a look at that. And it's not like they're going in and tying someone up and ransacking the house.
I've been a burglary victim 3 times, twice in my professional offices and once at home. It's not fun. By the same token, no violence was done, nobody was hurt, and other than some property taken, I was none the worse for wear. So.
I was a victim as well.
Isn't that fun?
Mm-hmm.
It's not great at
just
all.
because we were district attorneys and had a
does
law
not
firm
exempt
that
us.
does it, we can be victims of crimes as well.
And of course, no, I won't get into it. One of them deals with some real stupid criminals, but that's the case. We're going to take a break here. John, we're going to take a break, we're going to take about a minute of meditation. We're going to follow up after that immediately with John Hamels, who has replaced Mort Flexer, the geezer. John is going to give us some of his thoughts, and then we'll continue on with our program. So we're going to take about a minute here for a moment of meditation. Thank you.
Today, we gather to recognize the selfless decision of one of the most influential women of our time. The woman who, after having one too many drinks, chose not to drive home buzzed. Here today to honor Rachel is the family whose lives she spared.
Welcome
Following
back.
the tragic events of September 11th, there have been hundreds of violent attacks.
Well, there have been. But anyway, welcome back, everyone. This is the moment after our moment of public service and reflection. Turn it over to John Hamels for his replacement of the geezer, which of course is an unenviable task. But if anybody can do it, John certainly can. I've known John for a long time, and it's good to see him take an active role to replace the geezer. I turn the program over to John. Welcome, John.
Thanks, Jim. Morning, Dave. We've been sitting in the booth listening to you guys, and it's always wonderful to listen to two lawyers. Anyways,
First dig. First time on the show and he's digging us
Digging
out.
right at you guys. No, but I was saying, I was listening to you about your pyramid and all that sort of thing. As a former superintendent, we were doing the same thing, and in our communities,